he did a funny bit about how, the left, it's like the house will be burning down and they're all worried about the little dust in the corner of the room.
Welcome to Needlessly Complicated, your safe space for hopefully almost rational outlook on life. Hey Yasha, how are you doing today?
Good evening, Felix. I'm doing great. So we got a bit of follow-up this time. First of all, big thanks to Sophie for being here on the podcast last time. We were talking about languages, education surrounding languages, and even a bit of science. So it was a great episode thanks to her. And if you want to find out about her a bit more and follow her, just follow her on Twitter at Sophie Tizzle, which is spelled SOFITIZZLE. And we got other news as well. There were changes on our website. There is a new menu section which is called Be a Guest, and anyone can sign up there. You can suggest a topic, write about yourself a bit, and you will be invited on our podcast and we will talk about whatever you want.
Awesome news. And on related news, we are also trying to get up a recommended section on the podcast where we share friends' websites and friends' podcasts and shows on YouTube. So if you want to be in that, get in touch. The people that were already on the podcast will be in there regardless, so you don't have to contact us again. But if you want to be on, then contact us possibly through the Become a Guest form, so you can be on the show and we can exchange ideas, and then you can be featured on our website as well. And then if we have any viewers who have nice ideas for marketing the podcast so we can reach more people, so we can get more awesome guests, so we can make the exchange of ideas bigger and more diverse, then hit us up on Twitter or on our email form and make your suggestion there. Our guest today on the show was also on the Rubin Report fan show, and I've been kind of informed today that technically he runs a family business. He is the second hottest gay guy I know. He has a background in comedy, podcasting, and television. I wanted him as a host here, but he came as a guest today. You probably guessed it already. It's Dave Rubin, the host of Rubin Report.
Welcome to the podcast, Dave.
Thanks for having me, guys. Small steps. You always start as a guest and then you can move on to being a host. So we're at the right start here, I think.
Yeah, sure. That was a quite funny situation on your show.
Well, that was actually, that fan show that you were part of, Felix, was really one of the best, if not the most rewarding thing that I've ever done professionally. I mean, it was pretty damn close. It was so amazing. We did 20 interviews back to back with people all over the world, in the course of whatever it was, 2 or 3 hours. And it was so validating and such a true proof of how good ideas are connecting people. And bad ideas are connecting people too, but how we got to get our good ideas out there so that they can beat the bad ones.
It's awesome to hear. I'm glad you liked us, and listen, you sparked a lot of discussions afterwards. We had a few hangouts. We have a group on Facebook, and a couple of people actually started their own shows now. So it's a very valuable experience for everyone involved.
Nice. I love that. I mean, I saw that you guys had, did some YouTube stuff after, and now that a few of you are in the loop, and I'm getting tagged on Twitter a lot with you guys. So it's great. I mean, that literally is exactly what I want this show to be, and you guys are making it a reality.
Wonderful. So I have one hard question, because one of the first tweets I ever sent was when you were stuck at an airport and you had some Wi-Fi and you did a short Q&A. And what I asked you back then was if the regressives took over and you had to go to your favorite safe space, which 3 items would you take there? And you just said that's a hard one, but you never answered.
I never answered. Wow. All right. Then, wow, you're really putting me on the spot here. If I had to go to my safe space, if the regressives fully took over. So you're talking if like they have taken over and I'm like in a bunker and I have to bring 3 things to be with me for all time. Is that what you're telling me?
That's exactly what I'm telling you.
That's it. All right. Well, first I would bring obviously the DVDs of the original Star Wars trilogy. That seems, very important to have.
Very good.
I would bring my dog, because I wouldn't want her to have to deal with that, you know, I don't know where dogs fall on the oppression Olympics. So I'd want her to be okay. And, I mean, it would be too easy to say my partner. So let me think of something else. I'd need a basketball down there. You know, I'd have to have a basketball just to dribble a little bit.
Awesome.
Can I have a basketball down there? A hoop?
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
Why not? There are no rules in the world that is taken over by regressives.
You're right. Yeah, I need a hoop and a basketball. I don't know if those two count as separate things.
Not really. So, on the more serious question, I wanted to ask you, how did you originally get into politics at all?
Yeah, you know, I was always interested in politics from when I was a kid. I remember my dad taking me to register to vote the first time, and my family, nobody was in politics per se, but like there would always be big political arguments at, you know, dinner table or holidays or, you know, most of my family was Democrat. But we had some Republicans and some people all over the map, but, you know, just, always talking about issues, talking about what's going on in the world kind of stuff. And then when I went to college, I studied political science. I was a poli-sci major and I thought maybe I'd be a politician. I really thought that was the route. And I remember being in class and so many of the classes were taught by professors who I felt they were just like frustrated that the system is just so broken. You know, they talk about things and say, well, it's supposed to work this way, but it doesn't. Or this is how a law is supposed to pass, but, you know, it doesn't never happen that way or whatever it is. So I remember thinking like, I guess I don't want to be a politician. And then when I got out of college, I basically needed something to do. And about a week after I started doing stand-up comedy. And then I always did political stuff. But politics, you know, it's interesting because politics is, at least in America, it's coming back right now. Our political system is so whacked, and between Trump, a reality host, and now Clinton and everything else, it's like, it's cool to talk about politics again, which is nice, but I wish our debate was a little brighter. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and today you retweeted, I think it was you, when Donald Trump told Hillary that she would be former years of Obama, and she just tweeted at him saying, delete your account. I mean,
yeah, it's like, you know, first off, if she knows a little something about deleting things, right? Because she's got this whole email situation, right? So it's a little ironic on her part. But really my point of my tweet, and I said something like, you know, it's come to this, America, or something. And it's like, the point is that, you know, Trump, we know he uses Twitter to just make people crazy, and he's just trolling everybody all the time. And the more that he trolls people, the more they react, the stronger he gets. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy kind of. And Hillary, look, if there's one person in America who I think can actually battle Trump properly, it is Hillary. That's not a great ringing endorsement of her, but I do think she is so seasoned. She has been through every attack known to man forever, that if anyone could do it and sit at a debate at the table with her, that I think it is her. But that being said, you know, she does that delete your account thing, and it's like, well, now you're kind of stooping to his level. And the more that you stoop to his level, look, people did it in the Republican primary. You know, there was, I don't know if you guys saw this, hopefully not all of our American stuff purveys all over the world and it affects you guys too much, but you know, there were a couple of days where all of the other Republicans all tried to stoop to Trump's level. So Marco Rubio tried to go that route and be really rude and make jokes, and it just blew up in his face. And Ted Cruz tried it, it blew up in his face. So in a way, the more she does that, the more it plays to him. And he's just got this thing planned. He understands the media, and he's got it planned, and they're just giving him everything he wants.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, I kinda thought that she must, that tweet is sad in a way that she's dropping down to that level, but I think it's also a tactical move because she's the first one that kinda fights back against him. I mean, Jeb Bush tried that once. I've seen a video where he turned it around on Trump, and then Trump just immediately demolished him afterwards. So
right. Well, that's what I mean. If anyone can do it properly, it's her, because the delete your tweet, that, look, it's a good young reference, or delete your account, whatever it is. It's a reference that makes sense in the Twitter world and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is, I don't know how much the Twitter stuff or even the Facebook stuff or Snapchat, I don't know how much that really translates into votes. It translates into buzz, and it translates into, CNN. It will probably lead with that story tonight. I mean, that's a pretty sad state of affairs that, Donald Trump sitting at his desk takes 10 seconds to tweet something. Hillary, it probably wasn't even her. It was probably a staffer that, retweets it with the comment. And that's going to lead the national news tonight. We still have, what do we have? About 7 months now of an Obama presidency. Like, let's focus on that. But if you turn on the news every day, it's just wall to wall election coverage. And it's like, there's other things that are happening right this moment all over the world, not just in America.
Yeah, that's true.
So you said that Hillary would be probably the only person who could battle Trump, who has a chance. But would you vote for her?
I'm not sure what I'm going to do, and I'm getting people on both sides that are, really demanding me to endorse someone or say what I'm going to do. Look, there's a lot of things I don't like about both of them. When it comes to Hillary, her husband already was a 2-term president. She has been in the machine forever. And I think that while she strikes me as a competent statesman, and, she's been Secretary of State, she didn't do a lot of great things, but she did some decent things. She's just been around it for forever. And I think that's a little bit of a problem. I don't want these legacies, these dynasties. Why did the people that founded America, we came here to get away from, having kings and queens. Well, now we're starting to do it ourselves. We have Clintons and we have Bushes, and then one day we'll have a Malia Obama, and then, Jaden Smith will probably be president in 2040. So I don't like that. Just the idea that we have to always turn to these families as if they're the only ones that can save us. And then on the other hand, look, Trump has said a lot of crazy stuff, but he's cutting through a lot of the nonsense that I hate and all this social justice warrior stuff that you guys know that I hate. And yet at the same time, I have no idea what his core is. I have no sense that I know what his belief system is, other than he really wants to win. And so I have major concerns about both of them. So I'm really not sure what I'm going to do yet, but, I think probably by the end of the summer. Look, this thing's not till November, right? So even by the end of the summer, if I say something, it'll give people enough time to think if they care about what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's true. And I would say you shouldn't put endorsing anybody over your own political views and making a good decision with your actual vote. I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely. And, as an interviewer also, although I'm very open with my feelings, and really if I always tell people what I think if they directly ask, or if I'm in an interview, I try to share my thoughts as well. But the longer that I go without directly saying I'm voting for this person, I think it allows my interviews to be a little more open and, I don't want to say honest, because I'll be honest either way. But I think once I fully show my cards, like this is the person who I'm supporting, I think it could change the tone of the interviews a little bit before the election, because people may say, well, see, Dave's supporting Hillary, so he asked this question that way, or Dave's supporting Trump, so he did this, or Dave's supporting a third party candidate, so he's, throwing out his vote. So I think the longer that I can be as honest as I can, which is what I always try to do, I think that sort of benefits the whole conversation.
But this is also a particular US politics problem, isn't it? Because you have only 2 parties. So if you endorse anybody, you choose one, then everybody seems to know your position on every issue. It doesn't matter what the issue is. Once you are in one box or the other, you know everything about him. So that's
you're so right. I mean, it's a huge problem. We only have 2 functioning parties. You guys in Europe, I think, do this much better. And look, it comes with certain problems that you have, because sometimes in certain countries it can be hard to create coalitions and things are often fractured, and then smaller parties can hold bigger parties hostage and all that stuff. So no system that I know of is perfect. But yes, you're totally right that, it's thought of that if you're a conservative, you might be more for, guns, right? And then you might be more against gay marriage. But or if you're a Republican, those things have nothing to do with each other. They have just simply nothing to do with each other. So they keep giving us this choice between two things. And the truth is that most people have some beliefs that might be a little more, liberal, some beliefs that might be a little more conservative. Some people don't, some people are total party people and some people are all over the map. So by only giving us two choices, and by the way, the corporations fund, it's not a coincidence that usually the way the corporations fund things, it's like 51% Republican, 49% Democrat. And it sometimes fluctuates either way a little bit. That's not a coincidence. That's because the guys are trying to like hedge their bets and make sure that they're going to have some influence either way. But we desperately need a third party in America. And really we need a fourth and fifth and sixth party, which is why it's very possible that I might support Gary Johnson, who's running as a libertarian and, basically wants smaller government and doesn't want the government in your bedroom and a bunch of that kind of stuff. And because if there was ever a year to have a sort of, a protest vote, I think this would be it. But I'm not saying that's what I'm doing. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
So this year in the US election seems particularly, at least to our viewpoint, it seems very important with the Supreme Court nomination coming up and then possibly towards the end of the presidency, maybe a second one. So you can have huge influence there. You have the libertarians coming up, but at the same time, if you vote libertarian, then you're probably kind of also voting for Hillary, I'd assume. And then there's the whole issue of the anti-establishment movement that has been growing now. And I think I have heard on your show some opinions that if you vote for Trump now, it might even be bad because the movement would simply lose steam after he is in office. What do you think about that?
Well, listen, there's definitely an anti-establishment thing going on in America right now because Trump was the anti-establishment guy. He is the nominee for the Republicans, and on the Democratic side, even though they ultimately have gone with Clinton, basically as of today or yesterday, that Bernie Sanders, was clearly the anti-establishment guy and the media loved him and was getting all the young people and all that. So anti-establishment stuff is cool right now without question. The real issue is, okay, so if an anti-establishment guy comes in, they very quickly, by just the nature of the word, the definition of the word of establishment, they become the establishment. And would these people govern so differently? Bernie was saying a lot of things about, I'm going to do this to the banks or I'm going to do this to campaign finance or blah, blah, blah. But it's like, you're only a third of the government. That's why I think that education and the way I try to approach my show about talking about issues is so important because people need to understand the president is the executive branch. We have three branches. You got the executive branch. His job really is only to sign legislation into law. That's it. He signs it. The congressional branch, the legislative branch, which is Congress and the Senate, they write the laws. And then the judicial branch, basically the Supreme Court, they decide what's legal. These things are equal in America. It's a great system of checks and balances that we have. So people vote for the president as if they think they're voting for a king. They think they're voting for someone that can just do whatever the hell they want. He's going to fix everything. And it's just a silly way of thinking. So that's why, a lot of times when Bernie would be saying, I'm going to do this and it's going to save $4 trillion and I'm going to do this. And it's like, well, actually the president doesn't have the power to do those things. And if you think the president does, then you're actually a threat to democracy. So I always default back to education is the key. People need to understand how does the government work? And local elections are as important as the national ones because you need a strong legislative body to get laws up so that the president can sign them.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. It always strikes me as odd that a lot of Americans think that way in terms of the president. I mean, I used to think that way when I was younger because the US president has quite prestige in Germany. But yeah, it obviously doesn't make much sense. So we did on one hangout, with a lot of the people who were in the fan show talk about immigration politics. And we kind of came to the conclusion that even though Trump's idea of a wall is, well, I call it a metaphor mostly, because he's not actually going to build a huge actual brick wall. But
right.
the idea of border control, how do you view it, especially in the light of the European migrant crisis and also the illegal immigrants in the US?
Yeah, well, I got to tell you guys, out of the 1,200 or so responses that we got to the fan show, a huge percentage, I would say something like 40% of the people that responded that were outside of the United States wanted to talk about that, especially the people in Europe, of course. So I think it's really interesting because I said this, Felix, I think I said this to you on there. I mean, we never talk about it in America. If you turn on any of our cable news, there is not even 1 minute of coverage of it on any of the big three channels. So I would say this, that it is the right, and not only the right, it is the duty of every nation on earth to protect its citizens and to protect its borders. The only reason we have nations is because there is something called borders. So in and of itself, it is not racist to protect your borders. And this is, you guys know how I feel about the regressive left, but this is something that the regressive left has done. They've made it sound like if you protect your borders, you're racist. And that's just crazy. Every nation on earth protects their borders. That is the whole point of having a nation. Otherwise, anyone could just go anywhere and do whatever they want. So, look, first off, I don't think Trump's going to build a wall even if he becomes president. I think he's using it as a negotiating ploy. And there may be parts where there's walls and there may be parts where there's electronic surveillance and maybe there'll be more troops in certain parts and things of that nature. But the wall has become more of a talking point, I think, than a specific thing that he's going to do. The important issue really is that however people come to this country, whether it's by plane or by boat or through, a porous Mexican border or whatever it is, that we're vetting these people properly. That's really what this is about. So every time someone makes this about racism, they're doing such an injustice. And those people that make it about racism are the very people on the left who are pushing decent people to vote for Trump. Because if you're an average person, right, or especially for you guys in Europe, I mean, think about where you are, Felix, in Germany. Everything that Germany has done, with what I think 1.2 million migrants in there.
More by now.
Yeah. So everything Germany has done, you guys have now this incredible strain on the system. I would view, I know some people will say, "Oh, Merkel's secretly trying to destroy the country." I don't know that. I don't know that it's that. I think she probably was trying to do something she viewed in a humanitarian lens. But at the end of the day, if you haven't vetted 1.2 million people properly and 1% of them turn out to be either jihadists or whatever it is, that's a lot of people. So this isn't about racism. I don't think Germany is a racist society because it just brought in all these people. They didn't bring them in to then be racist to them, right? That's just a crazy thought. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't some actual racists. Of course there are in every country. But the point is all countries have to have borders and have to have responsible ways of vetting people that come in. That's just simply the truth. I know that my friends on the left don't want to hear that, but it's just the truth.
Yeah, I agree. It's just so frustrating when you're talking about concrete issues like border control, and it's always turned into racist, sexist, whatever.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, that I was on a show with a friend of mine who's on the left, a sort of friend of mine, a couple months ago on a radio show, and we were talking about the border thing, and he kept implying that because I kept saying, well, we need to vet these people properly, he kept implying that I was racist. That was the implication. He didn't flat out say it, but he kept saying it. And he said something to the effect, he was like, well, Dave, why wouldn't you have somebody move into your house, a migrant move into your house? And I was like, well, first off, I live in a little, basically not even a 2-bedroom apartment. So that would be a problem. First off, I barely have any room here. But I said to him, I know you make a lot more money than me and you live in a house in the suburbs. So why don't you take some people and I'd be happy to help facilitate it? Cause you're obviously very pro, immigration and you're pro having these people here. So why don't you do it? And suddenly he was like, oh, well, I have young kids and my wife would be on it, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's what I mean. I'm glad you guys laughed at that because that's how laughable their positions are. They're taking intellectual positions to make you feel guilty when the reality is are they actually doing it? You know what I mean? I know people out here that are television people, big immigration leftists, and that live in $1 million homes. And it's like, guess what? They're not going to put them in their pool. They could, but they're not going to drain their pool and make it a house, but they could.
Yeah. These the same television people, you said that in US you don't even hear about this migrant crisis, and in EU we have seen that there is so much misinformation on this issue. So the media has failed us in some way, right?
Oh, the media has hugely failed us. I mean, Douglas Murray, who I think you guys are probably familiar with, who's a brilliant writer in the UK who I've had on the show. He always talks about how Americans think that everything in the world is revolving around us. Every time something happens anywhere, the attacks in Paris happen, or the attacks in Brussels happen, or anything happens in the Middle East, we immediately go, oh, you see, look what we did again. It's because of us. And it's such a myopic and silly way an immature way, really, to look at the world. Because guess what? People don't only base their actions on us. They base their actions out of self-interest too. And he said this is a very American, I think he described it something to the effect of like it's a disease in America. And I really do subscribe to that, because we have a bad habit of that, and it's a fault of the media because the media only talks about us here. Which is why I was so happy to do the fan show, and why I've had, Bayan Sami Abdul Rahman from the Kurdish regional government, and why I had Tino Sanandaji from Sweden, and, Tariq Fatah. We talked about, Pakistan and India and all that stuff, because I want people here to know there's other things going on in the world. And if we stop thinking everything's about us, maybe we'd be able to solve some problems.
So it's a lot the same in Germany. I'm not sure if there are any state-funded news agencies in the US. Are there?
Well, there are things like NPR, National Public Radio, that's funded by the state, but it's not hugely in any way. There might be a little public television, but not that has any real influence.
So, and I'll talk a bit about Germany here, because it's quite interesting. In Germany, the big news shows basically the show that your grandmother turns on at 8:00 in the evening to see what happened in the world, are actually state funded. And since I've been doing this whole thing with being on the internet and learning more about politics, especially world politics, I've just seen how much they actually are influenced by the government. They label everything in a way that is very government friendly, and they ostracize government critics immediately in the national news. So as a person who has worked in media and now you got your own show, do you think there's any way we can take power away from these big corporations and give shows who are more diverse and more honest, like your show, give them more power?
Well, I think the way you do it, hopefully, is exactly what we're doing here. I mean, you guys somehow found out about my show. Yasha, you in Hungary, and Felix, you in Germany. We're far apart. Have you guys even met in person?
Once.
All right. So you guys met once in person, but what connected you is ideas. And that's what somehow got you to me. And that's what what Sam Harris did a year or two before that sparked in him that got to me, and I'm sure somebody sparked something in him. That's how we can win this thing. But, we have an interesting problem here in America, because we don't have, as I just said, we don't have that much state-funded media, but our media as a whole, many of our politicians are married to people that are in the newsroom, or brothers with someone that's an anchor on television. Or we do this thing, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which maybe you guys have seen some video from.
Yeah.
And basically you have all the main, big time politicians and the big time media people, and they all get together and they're having drinks and all that. And look, in and of itself, that's not terrible. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're working together, except at the end of the day, when you've met someone and you hang out with them and you drink with them, it does change things. It just does. And then the internet came along and it started democratizing a lot of this stuff, and there were new voices out there, and that's great. But then on the other hand, the problem with the internet is that it's not policed by anyone. So I don't mean that a government should come in and police it, but it's very hard to ascertain what's true on the internet. So now you have all sorts of news, quote unquote news people who sit at a desk and spout nonsense. And it seems as legit as an actual journalistic venture. And it often isn't. So finding truth is extremely difficult.
So how would you say can we change that? Because obviously the journalists at the moment who are the big news agencies aren't necessarily that much better anymore. The ethics of journalism, because even though the internet is pretty hard on finding the actual truth, the big news organizations themselves are pretty bad at the actual truth right now.
Yeah. I don't know other than I think somehow people instinctively can figure out what's true. I think we have some sort of internal mechanism that allows you to figure it out if you can get the space in your brain to do so. And if you're just slammed with nonsense all day, all these people in the news that want to give you easy answers. Everything's, the Democrats did this and they're evil and bad, or the Iranians did this and they're evil and bad, or America did this and we're evil and bad. It's like, guess what? It's not that easy. So if you can just throw those people away, and that's a huge bulk of them, just these people that pretend they have the answers for everything. If you throw those people away and you can try to focus in on the people, whether you agree with them or not. So look, this is somebody, like my friend Milo Yiannopolous, who I disagree with on many different things, but I think I will always stand for his right to speak freely, and express himself. And if you can find people that are constantly pushing freedom of thought, free critical thinking, the battle of ideas, then within that you can look, at the end of the day, it's on you. You got to figure out what's true. I know that it sucks and it's work and most people just want to ignore it. But you can do it. And I try to do it every day and I'm sure I fail often, but, that's the job for all of us that care. If you want to be awake in this world and care, that's what you got to do.
Well, you're doing an amazing job. I mean, you have so many listeners and so many awesome guests. But there is one thing I wanted to ask you, connected to that, is that you mainly interview other people and you mainly ask others questions. So do you have plans to get your own views out there in the open more often, or?
Well, look, as I said before, I think that sometimes by asking a question a certain way, I can show the audience what my view is on something. And look, I don't yell at my guests. So sometimes they'll say something that I think is either ridiculous or outrageous. If my policy is if someone flat out lies to me, so if they say something that I know for sure is a lie, then I will call them out on it. If they're expressing an opinion that I'm not happy with, I can push in a certain way, but I would rather that opinion be out there for people to understand. As far as my opinions, I mean, look, I'm here right now. We have a little more time. I'm happy to answer any question that you guys want to ask me specifically, if you want to pin me down on something specifically. But, yeah, I like interviewing and I like being on this side of the interview. And, when all these journalists, they'll tell you, I'm not partisan, or I don't have an opinion on that, or it's like, really? This is what you do for a living and you don't have an opinion? Then you're in the wrong line of work.
So since you've opened yourself up to to questions,
okay.
So one thing I've been increasingly interested in since I basically watched your show and got into libertarianism, because in Germany, incidentally, I never, as in school and in political education, I never even heard about that concept before. So I only came to that by your show. The whole welfare thing and the role of the government. We talked to that, to Adam from Sweden, and he basically thinks that our Western societies are replacing the family with the government. So the government has to step in and care for you and be kind of your mom. What do you think about that?
So it's an interesting philosophical argument. So I think what a lot of people on the right said, and I think this is probably sort of what Adam was saying to you, is that if you have a good family unit, and by that they usually mean a father and a mother, but in most cases it could probably be two fathers or two mothers or whatever it is. But if you have, some sort of family unit, that family unit can together sort of have a set of beliefs, a set of, a code of conduct that it lives by, and that you will help each other succeed in life. And that family unit doesn't just mean the people that are under one roof, but the extended brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and cousins, etc. And the more that the government comes in and says, well, you don't really need that because we can give you everything. We can give you free education. We can give you, this social security net or this or that, that the more power the government can have. So I think it's an interesting, I don't know that anyone has the real answer on what the best way to do it is. Look, a lot of libertarians, and I have a lot of libertarian beliefs, a lot of libertarians would say there should be no social safety net, period. They would say that the government, it's not the role of the government. I had Yaron Brook on my show from the Ayn Rand Institute, and he basically said that religious institutions or social institutions or local organizations, that they can help people that need help, but it's simply not the role of the government. I don't know that I fully buy that, but I think there is some legitimacy to that. I think the government, it may be a moot point. America has existed for over 200 years. We've done things a certain way with a certain social safety net. It's not perfect, and it should certainly be changed, and we should always be trying to help people get better jobs and do more on their own. But I don't think you can just rip it away and have nothing for people. Although I do think that a lot of people would find that their local communities might help them, things that are not governmentally based, basically. But I don't know what the specific answer is. I don't think anybody does. I really don't. But I also know that just keeping the government growing and growing and growing is not good. I don't think the government should have that much to do with your life. I think the government should make sure that, your roads are working and that when you walk outside, you don't get shot and that your water isn't tainted, and a few other things, but not much more beyond that.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the point I arrived at, incidentally. The thing that always bugs me about politics, and that's maybe due to my education as a scientist, is that it's so hard to find any data on anything. We planned one episode about social welfare, and we tried to really dive into numbers. We tried to find numbers of how is unemployment rate related to the social welfare system, and how is healthcare costs related to a social welfare system. But what was immediately apparent that, first of all, the few academic papers that were there were very complicated, but at the same time the evidence was very weak. And on the other hand, they were mostly biased. So how do you deal with, because that's something I'm struggling with, how do you deal with the sheer amount of information that you have to really go through to form a really based argument on some political position, and then the whole amount of positions that you would have to form opinions about? How do you deal with that?
Look, that's a great question, and it's almost impossible, but it goes to what I said earlier about, these news people that are on air and they're so opinionated and they know everything. It's so funny. They know everything all the time and they've never done anything in their lives. Like they know they know how to solve everything. They can solve immigration. They can solve welfare. They can solve racism. They can solve everything. Yet for some reason, all they can do is talk about it. They never actually do it. They just talk about it. So, as I said before, when people come in with these easy answers, it's like, guess what? You haven't read the papers that you're talking about, Felix. If someone will come in and talk about a social safety net, you think these idiots on television have read the papers? You think these morons who voted for Obamacare, whether you like it or not, you think they read the 1,000 pages? Of course not. And that's the inherent problem, that we have huge issues to deal with, and our system, and I suspect that this is probably similar for both of you guys in different countries, that the systems that are in place, they reward people for not being that bright. They reward people for not being that nuanced or thoughtful. And that's a real shame. So, when they come in with the easy answers, that's when I'm always like, something ain't right about this. Cause unless you fix something in your life, if you're just, every time the president does something, you're screaming, you know how to do it better, or you know that why he did it. It's like, no, you don't. No, sorry, you don't.
Well, you need to educate the public, so that was your solution, right? But you can't really expect everybody to be knowledgeable about so many issues that we need to be aware of to decide the right way.
That's true. That's why you need a healthy distrust of the government. That's why what I would teach. It's not that you have to teach everyone in high school or college about every single issue. That would be impossible, and people don't, a certain amount of people simply won't care about economic issues. A certain amount of people won't care about social issues, et cetera, et cetera. But what you have to teach people is critical thinking. Teach them how to think so that when they get out into the real world, they can understand that these screaming demagogues are just that. And they can understand that there's a system in place that sometimes works for them and sometimes doesn't. But let them critically be able to think about, should the government help me? Why? What is that? What does that mean? What do taxes mean? What does foreign intervention mean? Can you do a humanitarian? Can you help people, poor people who are being murdered mercilessly in Syria? Can you help them without toppling a regime? And if you topple a regime, do you have to be there forever? So we need to think critically. It's not about teaching them about every issue and the minutia of every issue. It's about making them think about what are the philosophical underpinnings of the things that affect us.
That's a good thought. So coming back to this whole education debate, one big event that just happened was obviously the Reason Rally. And you were there as a speaker, if I'm correct?
Yep, I was.
So the Reason Rally, I first saw it, I think some years ago, but I really wanted to go there. But I'm gonna be a bit critical here, and a lot of it is possibly the Twitter mob, but I want to hear from somebody who was there and who actually attended the event. How was the Reason Rally? It seemed quite empty on a lot of the pictures. That was the main criticism, I think. But then also some of the speakers said some kind of dodgy things, and also the whole Humanism Plus thing that happened with the organizers was a bit dodgy, I think. How did you experience it?
Well, look, I can only tell you my specific experience. Now, from what I understand, that the first time they did it 4 years ago, they had about 15,000 people. I think their hope was around 30,000 people this time. My guess is they probably had somewhere between 10 and 15. Now, I can tell you this. It was extremely hot and humid in DC this weekend. Extremely hot. So, I'm sure a lot of people stayed away, but of course that's not an excuse. But yeah, they definitely didn't get the numbers that they wanted. But the people that were there, the feeling that was there was wonderful. You guys would have loved it, because it was people of every walk of life, of every nationality and color and sexuality there to say, how do we get critical thinking back into government? So on that level, it was great. Look, I saw some of these videos that people were making about the social justice stuff and all that. I just didn't see any of it. I can tell you that when I gave my speech, I talked about the need for tolerance. I talked about deplatforming people and why we shouldn't do it. I mean, that was I was clearly talking about what happened to Dawkins a couple of months ago. And I was talking about it to people that definitely, many of them were for it. So I didn't pull any punches personally. And I can't say that I heard any of the SJW stuff specifically, but I for sure, I missed hours of the speeches because I was wandering around myself. So I can't speak to what other people said. But look, no, I'm not defending it or pushing it on you, other than to say nothing is pure. We all want something to be pure. Oh, this is the Reason Rally. It's going to be absolutely filled with the people I want it to be filled with, and it's going to be perfect, and we're going to change the world, and everyone's going to be perfect. And things are rarely that way. So I'm sure some of the criticism was legit. I can just tell you what I saw, and I didn't see any of that. But as a few people have said to me on Twitter that, because of the Humanism Plus stuff and some of the code of conduct stuff, it may have kept away a certain amount of people. And I guess that's totally legit.
Yeah, it's quite sad, really. When kind of the news broke about the Humanism Plus thing, I think a lot of people were quite shocked at that development, because it just, the plus just doesn't go with anything. Atheism Plus was a disaster. Humanism Plus is probably not a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. And nothing, as I said, nothing's going to be perfect. Bill Maher did a funny bit maybe 2 months ago. I was actually in the audience at the show that day. He did a funny bit about how, the left, it's like the house will be burning down, and they're all worried about the little dust in the corner of the room. and that's sort of what I was feeling about this thing. It's like, look, guys, if you're Humanist Plus or whatever it is, or you hate the social justice warriors or whatever that is, it's like basically the people that were at the Reason Rally are your people. They're still people who believe basically in critical thinking and free thinking and all that stuff. So even if you don't agree with them on everything, I thought some of the criticism was a little overboard, but it's totally these people's right to do what they want.
as we've come kind of to an end with the time here, there's one more question we wanted to ask, and kind of on behalf of all these people that you've motivated to start their own shows, and especially with the fan show now, because there are at least 5 people that we know of that are coming up with their own shows now. So as a person that has experience in, you did podcasts, you do the YouTube thing now, you're on Aura TV, you've been on the kind of old media as well. So as somebody with a lot of experience in media, what are kind of your insider tips for people who are starting out and who want to reach a bigger audience and want to get a community going and want to grow their channels and whatnot?
Yeah. Well, first I will tell you this. I have a major, major career life announcement coming this Monday, which will be posted on the YouTube channel. And it's relative to my future, the future of the show, future of everything I'm doing. So, you guys are hearing that first, basically. I teased it a little bit on Twitter, but I will tell you that. And I would say the answer to your question is that, don't be afraid to share your opinions. I get so many emails from people who say, oh, I saw something you did on the show and I was going to post it on Facebook, but I don't want to get yelled at by my friends, or I don't want someone to think I'm racist, or all this stuff. And it's like, if you right now, and I mean this, to both of you guys, you, Yasha, you, Felix, and everyone that's listening to this and all your friends in your life, if already right now, you guys live in Western democracies, imperfect ones, just like I do, but you do. And if you are afraid to share your feelings and say what you think and defend your thoughts and your values, then we've already lost. So the reason that people are listening to me is because I guess for some reason, I don't know why exactly, but I'm sharing my thoughts, and I do it because I care about this world, I guess. It's self-preservation. I want my life to be good, and I want my life to be good, and my life will be better if some good ideas win out. So the most important thing you could do, whether you're going to do an audio podcast or put videos on YouTube or go on Snapchat or just scream out your window, is say what you believe. And if you do that, you're already beating 90% of the people out there.
That's a wonderful thought. So thank you so much for being on the show. When I first got the email, I was kind of stunned that I could be on your show, and then now you're on our show. So thanks so much, Dave.
It's amazing.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. Listen, this is what it's all about. I love the fact that you guys decided to do something, that maybe had some spark to do with something I was doing. That is literally everything that this is all about. And hopefully someone listening to you is going to go, I'm going to do another podcast. And guess what? One day when so many people are doing it that I become irrelevant and you guys become irrelevant, guess what? That means because we won. So it'll be pretty good, To
quote you, it's all about the battle of ideas, right?
Yeah, there you go. It's about the battle of ideas.
Guys, since this episode releases after the big Rubin Report announcement, it's already here. He is now independent, and the show is funded fully by the fans via Patreon and PayPal. And I'm a Patreon already because I think it's a great cause, and I think Yasha is one too, right?
Yes, that's correct. I am a Patreon as well. I think it's a great cause, and everybody should go and donate because he's defending our free speech.
So if you are in the battle of ideas and if you enjoy his show, pitch in, and you can find it at rubinreport.com/donate. Enjoyed the episode and want to make your voice heard? Head over to reddit.com/r/needlesslycomplicated or chat with us on Twitter @ReasonFelix for Felix and @Yashoka for Yasha. If you want to support the show, head over to iTunes and rate plus write us a review. It is the best way to support the podcast right now and help grow the community. You can also share the podcast with your friends via social media, or even better, if you're old school, in person. And with that, see you in the next episode.